Have you ever felt stuck trying to change something, whether it's personal habits or perhaps a team at work? Often the default is just to say the same thing a bit louder and then wonder why nobody's listening. Well, I'm going to tell you keys for real lasting transformation by summarizing this book, Influencer, The New Science of Leading Change, by Kerry Patterson, Maxfield, McMillan and Switzler. So you can stop hoping for change and actually start leading real change. There's 3 keys to influence, and influence is the foundation of any change. So firstly, this would be focus and measure. You can't manage something that you don't measure. So begin with a clear, time-bound objective, not a vague one. Dr. Berwick, I believe, who's very high up in healthcare improvement in America, had an ultra-specific goal across hospitals: save 100,000 lives by June 14th, 2006 at 9 a.m. Glad to say that the hospital improvement initiatives did succeed in saving these lives, and therefore he's had some influence in the UK over the NHS various improvement strategies. The main thing though is about what you're tracking. It's not just a final outcome. You have to track vital phases and think where is best to influence. So if you're thinking about hospital acquired infections, that may be getting tubes out of people when the tube isn't needed. The second point of influence is to know the key vital behaviours. If you can identify these, then you can know what you actually can influence. You need to stop, look at a process and think, what are the 2 or 3 most important points in this process? So if, for example, in a different hospital, this isn't all about hospitals, but I'm a doctor, so these ones I kind of liked a bit. But in the US, they had a hospital satisfaction rating that patients would give, and they found that if any interaction with a member of staff, they made eye contact, smiled, explained what they were doing, and at the end of it said, is there anything else that you need? That the patient satisfaction scores went up highly. Thirdly is about engaging in the 6 sources of influence, and I'm going to cover these in detail shortly. But influence is this engine of change, and it's not enough to just rely on motivation alone. We need these drivers of change, motivation and ability, but across different levels: personal, social and structural. And if we can combine these, then we can make change inevitable. I'll briefly mention about positive reinforcement. This is the thing to try and use. Punishment can be good only really if positive reinforcement is not an option. And if you are going to use punishment, just give a warning shot first. If you continue to do that, you will be punished with X, Y or Z, and then you may change that behaviour at that point, use an influence and not have to rely on punishment. So we're going to master the 6 sources of influence now. And the first is personal motivation. And we have to really make people want to change, often by making them desire what perhaps they thought was undesirable. So for example, if we can show how a behaviour aligns with their values or their identity, or perhaps tell them a story that connects with them emotionally, then it will help them undertake that behaviour. So going back to hospitals, you may not want to say to doctors and nurses, sanitize your hands. If you can equate that to save lives by reducing hospital-acquired infection, that aligns with their values and they're more likely to do it. Second is about personal ability. Change takes skill. So we want to help people practice deliberately, comparing their performance to the best and then give quick feedback. So one of them, an interesting study, was about stroke patients, and they gave them medicines to prevent more strokes, and they found that they didn't really have a desired impact. But when they gave them a blood pressure monitor and they could immediately see, oh, I take this medicine, my blood pressure goes down, which then reduces the chance of me having a further stroke, compliance of people actually taking the medicines increased. Thirdly is about social motivation. We're all in essence tribal creatures, and if peers praise new behaviours or shame bad ones if they're wanting to use the punishment cue, then change actually spreads faster. So we really want to identify and recruit opinion leaders whose behaviour can influence others, and it can allow peer accountability, not just top-down pressure to try and drive change. Fourth is about social ability. Behaviour change is easier when people have help. So that's help from each other. There was a fascinating thing about micro loans in Bangladesh, and banks wouldn't lend people money because they didn't have assets to put as security to the loans. But somebody came along and said, the amount of money they need to get out of poverty is really quite low, about $27. And the difficulty is the banks wouldn't lend them money. And then they were going to loan sharks who had really high interest rates, and they're stuck in poverty. So somebody came up with the idea of giving a loan to a group of people, and then together they coached each other, practiced together, solved problems as a unit, and it actually brought communities together to work together and successfully get out of poverty. The fifth point is about structural motivation. Incentives only work when done right. Now, you need to use a reward to reinforce a positive behaviour, not just the outcome. And another obscure hospital study was that they gave out Starbucks vouchers for people who were doing good hand washing. And results actually shot up from 65% compliance to 80%. And they were giving these cards to the people who were probably the highest paid in the hospital, who didn't really need that money, but it was a reward, it was an incentive, and it inspired change. Sixthly is about structural ability. Change the environment to make the right behaviour easier. This is critical, and it can help, and you may want to use a smaller plate, for example, to reduce food waste, or put prompts to wash your hands next to a soap dispenser. And the environment often is the thing that we can use that will trump willpower, allowing change to occur. I'm going to give some real-world examples about how change was managed. One more from the hospitals was about hand washing again. Not just the Starbucks vouchers and moving the soap dispensers. It was actually taking a swab from people's hands and then growing that in a lab to see what bugs grew. And then it was sent back to people. So whereas you may think it's not me, it's them, you get an email that's grown some colourful E. coli and you think, I need to wash my hands better. And apparently it was a real success, and people even used their screenshots of their hands, swabs, for their screensavers. A nice one is about popcorn and environment. People went into a cinema and they were just given deliberately stale popcorn in different packages. One of the packets was much smaller than the other. And what they found at the end was that almost all of it was eaten. And it was stale popcorn. It was deliberately not very nice. But what it showed was that the packaging matters. Another is an interesting example called Project Chicken. You're going to have to bear with me a bit. But it's a story about team dynamics. And if you're a team leader and you're with the directors, and there's lots of team leaders there, they'll say, how is your project coming on? How is this part of the project coming on? And team project chicken is that you just say, yeah, it's going well, even when it's not, until one of the other team leaders says it's not going well. And then everybody can turn disapprovingly to that person and say, well, that's the reason that the team is behind, the project's behind because of that team. Whereas in fact, if they were more open and had a more radical discussion with some candor there, they would know that many teams are behind. A great one about environment is shipping containers, and it's just simply painting a line. They found that if you had an average container and you told staff fill them completely, they're only 45% full, and this is leading a lot of potential wastage and lack of profit. But by simply putting a line saying fill to here inside the shipping container, they found that the average container went up to being 95% full. So that would be almost double profits. A little bit about opinion leaders. If you want to change a group, don't necessarily start with the innovators. Start with somebody who holds reputational power. And because other people will be looking at them, not perhaps the person who is in the corner, keeping themselves to themselves, trying to innovate. They will be looking at the key leaders whom, when they speak and say yes, others will think that's a good thing to do. So today, if you want to start being an influencer, not in a social media way, I'm talking about influencing others. Firstly, set clear, measurable goals. No more vague missions, get specific, make the invisible visible. Secondly, pick a few vital behaviours to focus on. These small, little behaviours are the things that will drive the big changes. I'll mention propinquity. It's a fancy word for proximity or closeness, but this is something to think about, because if you can make the right behaviour easy by having it closer by, that's when people are more likely to do the right thing. So get the right tool in that room rather than having it at the other side of the warehouse, meaning other people will think, let's just use the wrong tool and cause a problem. Think about the 6 sources of influence: motivation and ability, personnel and structure. If you can't remember them, re-watch this, that'll help the watch time a bit. Tell stories, not lectures. I suspect people won't remember lectures very much unless there's stories. If you want to look at storytelling, I've made this video, check that out. And make change inevitable. Align personal values, peer pressure and the environment so change is going to occur. And can I change you enough to change you into a subscriber? There's a button down below. Feel free to like, comment. Thanks for watching. But just remember, influence isn't all about luck. There's a bit of science there as well.